All right, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're enjoying your afternoon here at NOTACON. For our next talk, we have Chris Gates and Vince Marvelli. Chris Gates is most famous as an American film director, writer, and cinematographer whose independent films in the 70s and 80s were predominantly exploitation pictures, similar to the works of Roger Corman and such, and other directors in the 60s at independent studios like American International Pictures. Vince Marvelli is the Phillips Tobias Professor of Material Science at the Technion Israel Institute of Technology, an associate of the U.S. Department of Energy's Ames Laboratory, and professor of materials science at Iowa State University. In 1982, he discovered the icosahedral phase, which opened the new field of quasi-periodic crystals. They're here to talk today about client-side penetration testing.
Thank you, Jim. Well, I got bored with the filmmaking stuff, so decided to break into computers for a living instead. So that's me. Vince and I co-founded Full Scope Security a couple months ago. Yeah, trying to bring more full scope pen testing to the world. Got a blog, Carl Onage blog. It's doing okay. New member of the Metasploit project. There's Vince. Do you want to say anything? Cool dude. So from presentations in, here's the kind of things, if you get up and leave after this slide, this is what I want you to take home. Attackers are using client-side attacks. Does anybody in the room kind of disagree with that? Everybody reading the Microsoft Security Incident Report and all that? That's what the bad guys are using. Client-sides are the new remote. Probably not a lot of argument about that. And you should allow your penetration testers to test and use client-side attacks to replicate the threat that you're facing in your network. And all that is for testing your organization's ability to detect and respond. So rather than one client-side attack ruining your whole day and compromising your whole network, let's test those things and then see how we can react, detect, and respond instead of just putting our head in the sand and crying. So that's kind of what this is about. So this is a proper model. If we all agree that these things are happening, is ignoring it, does ignoring a problem make it go away? And is not testing that a good thing to do? So if I take a snapshot in time, I look at your web servers, and everything's hunky-dory, your firewall's great, I can only see port 80 in your patch. Do you really have a secure network? Did you look at what makes you money, and how are you protecting that? So that's kind of what we're going to talk about.
All right, I get to use the cool old school mic. And just to clear things up, in 1982, I was 4, so I don't think that was true. All right, so like Chris mentioned, reality here. Remote exploits aren't really what they used to be. Way back in the day, web servers were all vulnerable. Your databases were directly talking to things on the internet. They weren't backends, they were right up there out front. People use FTP all day long, didn't know what secure protocols actually were. So breaking into things, nice and easy. They're still just as easy, we just have to go about it a different way. So client sides are the way that we're doing it. Just so you don't think that we're making things up, we did do a little bit of stat gathering, and we're not going to bore you with these, but 8 out of SAN's top 20 vulnerabilities are directly related to client sides. And most attackers or researchers are looking at how do we exploit client sides because defenses have gotten so much better elsewhere. All right, a lot of red here. So in the last quarter of 2008, the top 10 web attack vectors, 8 of those were directly related to client sides, could be exploited via client side. So a lot of people look at this and they're like, oh, it's web attacks. Yep, but we can also use your people internal to exploit these things. Anything from your weak browsers to every Adobe application known to man, and even movie players. So just because you're viewing a movie and you're seeing what you want to see, there could be other things going on in the background. This is good. So question, anybody in here have an uncle in Nigeria that maybe died recently and wanted to send them a couple $1 billion? I do, and he sends me emails all the time. I expect most people in this room didn't open that email or respond to that email or give up the information that they wanted. However, what's frightening is that 1 in 13 people over the last 2 years did. And that's a very generic, random, nobody's got an uncle in Nigeria doing that, but yet people did it. So if, as a pen tester, you do your proper research up front on a client, and you target your attack directly to them, to what their business really is, using that same statistic, you can assume that at least 1 in 13 people you're testing are also going to open your much more targeted email. So we are doing some things well, which is why we do client sites now. Organizations finally realized that, hey, we need to actually have a dedicated security team. We need to have our internal network separated from our external public network. We know what IDSs and IPSs are, and we know how to use them. We have dedicated teams using those products. And unfortunately, Microsoft is actually getting a little bit better at getting things patched. So we need to find a weak link somewhere. And that's why we're here today. Everybody in this room and everybody that's sitting behind your computers, they're your weak link. Why are they the weak link, and why do we go after them? Well, they always have access to your data. They're connected to your network already. They've probably added themselves to your local admin group because nobody knows how to configure things properly. And they're always more gullible than your network admins. They're not thinking security. All they're thinking is, hey, I want to read this. I want to view this. I want to open this because it looks interesting. So they don't care. So let's talk about their desktop. This is what we're going after. It's definitely much more complex because users have the ability to add everything that they want. It is much more secure from a standpoint that it's behind all those devices, which makes it much more difficult for us to fingerprint. But because of users' needs to add whatever they want, patching problems with third-party applications, you end up with a whole bunch of attack vectors. And that's what we're going to talk about here. So again, why are they so vulnerable, so complex? Lots of third-party applications, not a priority for patching clients over your critical servers. Everybody wants to make sure those servers are patched on Patch Tuesdays. Clients aren't so much an issue. They'll get around to them eventually. Adobe versus Microsoft, they have different patching policies. So third-party apps generally become more vulnerable and stay vulnerable a lot longer. And a lot of your patching, unless you're an administrator that has a really good handle on the applications in your network, you probably don't have anything patching all your third-party apps on a regular basis. A lot of times you may have to go around manually and get those things patched. So WSUS isn't going to patch your random third-party apps. So does this look bad to anybody? So a lot of people may look at this and say, wow, that's a bunch of crap, and how could you possibly operate in that environment? Well, I'm glad that people like to operate in that environment because that gives us a whole bunch of attack vectors. If you notice the taskbar down at the bottom, there's a whole crap load of applications loaded, and those all equate to attack vectors for bad guys. So again, why would we want to target a user's access versus, say, exploiting something and becoming system? Well, users have legitimate access to all of your critical data. So if you see system accessing something, that probably looks a little bit weird. If your user that generally does that on a day-to-day basis is accessing that, that's normal, that's okay. There are domain users. So as a domain user, credentialed domain user on the network, you can gather a lot more information than you can as, say, system. You can view other users in the network that turn into additional attack vectors. And the big thing is all of your defenders are looking at what's coming into your network. How many are looking at what's going out of your network? So these users have legitimate access from inside to browse the web, to make connections external, with very little filtering in most cases. So in your typical pen test, you find this in the back of every hacking magazine, book known to man. You do your recon, your scanning, fingerprinting, exploitation, post-exploitation, privilege escalation, and then for pen testers that need to deliver reports, eventually you do your reporting. We'll show you a little diagram of how that looks. Got your attacker and your target. And that went a little weird. Your firewall in place, and your bad guy does his scans and his tags. They all fail because you have some firewall that's dropping everything coming inbound. So there's your typical pen test. Your pen tester gives you the secure stamp, and then you pay them. So in this economy, you know, we don't want to be throwing our money away, and that's really what you're doing here. Anybody with an automated scanning tool can come and do this work and say you're secure. It doesn't mean you're really secure. So in a client side, we do a lot of the same things, but we spend a lot of time up front doing OSINT, you know, gathering that critical information that's freely available on the web so that we can generate and deliver a very targeted attack that helps our success rate tremendously. Get all that information, we decide on how we want to do this. We want to send you an email, we want to stand up a rogue website that you may browse to, send our attack, and we wait. Someone's going to open it eventually. Once that happens, secure access and start moving around on the inside of your network. And in most cases, the inside of the network's nice and soft and chewy. So here is our typical client-side pen test. So same scenario, and we still want to make sure that your firewall's doing its job. So we do our scans, we do our attacks, all these remote things, and they all fail in most cases. Your firewall's dropping them. Good job, you get that stamp. And then we find your weakest link. Stand up our evil website, send our email into those users, wait for the users to open it because it's so interesting to them. We drop an 0902 exploit, and we have reverse shell over 80. It looks normal, it's all encoded. Game over. So in this case, the money that you spend is very well spent. You're really getting the target. You're really getting all of your users tested. You're getting your devices tested. And all at the same time, you're getting a little bit of user training out there. You know, at the end of this thing, we can turn around and say, hey, Bob, Joe, and Mary all got owned here, and this is how it happened. So you get to provide a little bit of training in this methodology also.
So we spent some time as we've been doing this kind of coming up with some scenarios that we wanted to share for other people that pen test or are going to do some work like this in their organization. So we've got a few things. So we can target specific employees and groups. So if the client is deemed that, hey, finance holds the keys to the kingdom, they are in control of what makes us money, maybe we want to see what we can find out about the finance guys and send them an email. So maybe we want to send them an email with a malicious payload or point them to a malicious website. So your standard Metasploit type thing. Social engineering, maybe I just want to send them an email and get them to install a rogue program, set up a phishing site to target users and just grab credentials, or do large scale stuff. Generally that's going to be totally out of scope, but to throw it out there for completeness. You really run into the risk of random people actually getting exploited, which is never good for a pen test. Now if you're a bad guy, your bad guy is obviously going to go with number 3 first, right? That's what the bad guys in China and everybody else is doing, right? With the malware, drive-by stuff. All right, I've got one guy's up here with me. Pay attention. So escalating scopes within those scenarios. Is anybody concerned with gathering user metrics in their pen tests? Do they expect their pen testers to kind of give them metrics? Do they expect them to? Okay, good. We got a couple yeses. What we frequently see is people don't want to have you get a shell back through their network, but they want to know how many people clicked on the link, how many people forwarded the email, where did it come from, did people open it from home, did people open it from the internal network? So that's certainly something that as a scope you can offer to your clients. The other thing is just to fish for usernames and passwords. The other one, exploit actually do some sort of vulnerability or a Trojan, run malware without an exploit. So escalating scopes. Entry points. Anybody using any of that in their network? How many of you are blocking all of those at your firewall? Who blocks Office extensions in their mail gateway? One guy, 2 guys, 2 people. How about streaming media? Is streaming media people allowed to connect out to streaming media, ASF, MOVs? A lot of that stuff is allowed out and either through attachments or out. So, PDFs used to be the safe alternative to Office documents, and we saw in the last couple months that they're not. So that's been the new hotness. So all the other things there are all the other entry points to your network. And physical, if you can do on site, can you do CD drops? Can you drop a couple of USB keys in the bathrooms? Someone going to go in there and run that stuff. So a couple delivery methods. We've got email, and the 2 things within your email for your methodology is open my attachment, so I send you the thing I want you to interact with, or I say follow my link, which leads us into our web attack methods. our web stuff, phishing sites, send browser exploits, ActiveX Controls. Can I cross-site script you into doing some things? SMB relay, which is kind of fixed, but kind of not. Or do I just get you to download my malware or just give me information? So again, just different things you can do. It's going to depend a lot on what the users you're targeting are more prone to do. And instant messaging. Bottom line is I need you to interact with me, which is not too hard, and that's what we want to test. We want to test how willing are my users to interact with the bad guy or the pen tester. So some examples that we've been using. Office attachments are great. They're not, like I said, they're not usually filtered at the firewall or the mail gateway. Difficult to detect. Does anybody know of any AV that can analyze a macro and see what it's doing? Now, it used to be that the macro creation was easy. Now with Metasploit, it's super simple, which kind of sucks because that was the old reliable, but now everybody does it. So from one of our pen tests, it was flu shot season. So we sent out a little email and said, hey, here's where you can get free flu shots because everyone wants free stuff. We had a Excel macro Trojan attached to that. So we had an Excel macro Trojan attached to that, and we're going to show a little demo of something similar to that. Basically, we had the users lower their security settings, run the macro, and it would send the shell back out to us. So we test a few things in those scenarios. Can users actually lower settings? Are users actually opening these things or interacting with them? Is your firewall and any proxies in place to block that outbound traffic? So in the news, we wanted to say, hey, it just isn't us doing this. Back in the Olympics time, we had Adobe PDF phishing going around. It had JavaScript that would download stuff. That's kind of what it looked like. So malicious PDFs. Again, PDFs used to be the safe thing to open. Another one, attachments, Office attachments. This one had the jet engine MDB overflow. Did anybody see this one where the LinkedIn stuff was going around? Did anybody get this? This one was actually from my inbox. I got this too. So it was just an attached list, and it had malicious software that would just basically, hey, open this list, run the Trojan, and it was trying to steal usernames and passwords. Anybody seen anything come from Microsoft that's download my patch or installed my patch that I've attached? And this one was kind of cool because they PGP signed it, sort of. I mean, they just cut and pasted a PGP signature, but it's secure. So hey, if your users just say, I've heard of this PGP, I've heard of this encryption thing, this must be legit, someone signed it. All right. So we're going to do a couple demos. So anyway, most of the 4Pay frameworks do a lot of this, but we're poor. So I decided to use Metasploit. I'm a Metasploit fanboy. So if you want to buy us licenses, you can talk to me after. So what we're going to show is kind of one of the newer features. Anybody seen the new features with Metasploit that will actually dump it to VBScript? Just interact. Give me the finger or shake your head. Okay, cool. All right, good. The demo's working. This is why I recorded them, because I always had demo fail. So basically what we're doing here is creating the actual VB output. It takes a couple seconds for it to actually do its thing. Just want to make sure that it actually, obviously want to check to make sure that it actually did something. All right, so it's there. And that's our file that MSF payload generated for us. So we take our something worth opening Word document, so once they're done running it, they're not too suspicious. So in this case, we would have put our flu shot information in there. So we added our macro code. So basically it's going to give us a reverse interpreter shell back out. You can have it do whatever you want. If you want it to write a text file to the desktop or do whatever. Sky's the limit on this. It's really what the client wants to prove that you can do. So we're going to set up a multi-handler to actually catch the callbacks. Most of these file format type ones, if you want to have more than one person actually give you a callback, you want to set up the multi-handler to do that. All right, so we're waiting for someone to open it. So would any of your users actually do that? Would they actually enable the macro if I sent them an email that was, hey, why don't you go ahead and open this for me? We found on our pen test that if we can get the mail to actually hit someone's inbox, that we always have someone open it. Yeah, 100% of the time. If it actually made it to the inbox, they opened it. So kind of what we're showing here is, I'm going to show that we close, the user says, oh, well, I was dumb, or I know where to go get my flu shot, and things will still be running in the background. So that may or may not be important to you. So right now we're saying, hey, the Word document's still open, and we have our connection. I have to look because it's not playing on my screen. So. And then we're going to close it and show that we still had our outbound connection. So one of the other issues we run into with some of the client sides is if you do browser exploitation, it can hang up the browser. When you close the browser, it will actually drop your shell. So you can use some tools. All the frameworks do that. You can migrate off your iExplorer to another process in user land space and do that. So that was that. I mean, you saw it took me 5 minutes to generate that, not even 5 minutes to generate that and use that. So anybody heard of the file format exploits in Metasploit? Nobody. All right, cool. Well, basically what file format exploits are doing is taking the output of what was normally automatically served up by the framework and actually outputting it into that file. So PDFs are now outputted to PDFs. If you have a Word document, it's outputted to a Word document. If you have a vulnerable ActiveX control, I can output that to HTML. So instead of making you click that link and go to me, I can send you the HTML file. So sometimes people are more apt to actually open that HTML file, right? HTML is safe. And there's other issues if ActiveX controls are set to not run on the internet, but if I can open it locally, it will open in a different zone. So some other real fun things to do. A lot of the third-party ActiveX ones will not be marked safe for scripting. So the way to get someone to open that is to send them the actual HTML file and open it locally. And so all this is actually in the trunk. So if you're on the dev version, all the file format stuff that is there. It used to be kind of a pain to get it working, but now we've added the API, and there's actually quite a few things there. So what we're going to show here is a file format one that affected Opera, and it was a malicious HTML file. Basically, we did do a heap overflow with the file when you did the file extension to show that it worked on all kinds of OSs, but also show the importance of missing that third-party patch because WSUS isn't going to patch Opera for you. So if your users are installing Opera or if your users are running Opera and you don't know about it, you have vectors, right? So, but Opera is the new secure thing. So hopefully these are, I've kind of sped these up so they should move a little faster than the last one because you watched in gory detail how I set everything else up. So, HTML isn't evil, .html, tell it what I want for the payload. So it's going to generate it and output it out to a file that you can then send as an email attachment. That's where it's stuck at, Metasploit data exploits. And I'm going to set up the handler to call that stuff back. I mean, that was it. It's done. So that's a little bit of a whole demo, but. All right, so just showing that we're running as Opera in Opera space. Has everyone seen all the news about the malicious PDFs? Anybody seen any of that in their network? We were the client that got just totally hit up with that, right? I mean, it was rampant in the network, and because they were running old versions of Adobe, and that was kind of a nightmare to help clean that up. So again, demonstrating the risk and the issues of missing third-party patches or running outdated versions of stuff of a regularly allowed file type. They allowed PDFs through the mail gateway. So again, we're just generating the payload, actually making the PDF, setting the callback stuff. In real life, we're going to have that callback to us on 443 or 80, something that's going to be not so suspicious. But again, outputs the PDF's rule file. We set up the handler and email it off. We actually saw a lot of reports when I was doing some investigation of what was going on. A lot of people, hey, I'm opening these blank PDFs on the net, all these forums. Hey, there was an ad network that was actually serving up malicious PDFs, and there's all these tech support requests. So I kept getting these blank PDFs opening. I was like, oh man, that's really bad. It's no good for you. All right, so last demo, kind of what we run into with ActiveX stuff is users have to have that actual control installed for it to be useful if it's any kind of memory corruption one. So if they don't have the control installed, we're kind of out of luck. And like Vince talked about, it's very hard sometimes to fingerprint what ActiveX controls are installed, especially in your domain. Maybe you can find that stuff over open source information gathering. Generally, we just throw some stuff out there and hope it works. That's really what the bad guys are doing. I'm going to throw 50 different ActiveX bugs at you, and hopefully one of them will work. So what we're going to show here is the first time I'm going to show you that what happens when the control is not installed, and basically the browser is going to crash. And the second time is we're actually going to serve the vulnerable control. The user has to click yes one more time, and then we can exploit them. So we're going to make the user that wasn't vulnerable vulnerable. Would anybody see any use for this if you're pen testing? I mean, are your users allowed to do this? It's one of those things as you tighten down policies, you probably don't want them installing random third-party ActiveX controls if you can help it. So, we find a lot of times that for ease of use for people, they're allowed to do that. All right, so we generated the file, setting the handler. And we like to use the reverse TCP because it comes to us instead of us going to it. And right, things are much more less stringent outbound. So you enable. We like to just put in the fish that you may get an ActiveX control prompt. Go ahead and enable that for me because you need to see what's in there. Yeah, as long as you tell them to expect it, then it's usually not an issue. So if you missed it, the browser just crashed because the user didn't have that vulnerable control installed. So what we're showing here is the CSL ID of the vulnerable control. That's the site that was serving up the vulnerable control. Just as easily be your own web server that you stand up. So that code base equals whatever is where it tells it to actually download the control from, and there's the vulnerable control. You'll see a lot of the, Canvas just came out with, Canvas has its own third-party ActiveX, or its own ActiveX control, whose sole purpose in life now is to just download their MOSDEF Trojan. So they'll get a similar set of prompts. Do you want to run this? It's signed by immunity. Sure. And instead of doing any memory corruption stuff, it's going to actually just download the second part of the payload and give you your MOSDEF shell. So it's even better when you can have a control whose sole purpose is just to download the malware. So again, similar things. Like I said, you want to run it? Sure. So about this point, it's downloading the actual control from that website. And we're getting our shell. So we took someone that wasn't vulnerable and made them vulnerable by the fact that they could actually install those types of controls. So that was kind of the email attachments thing, which is common. And it depends on your environment whether those are going to work better for you or not. So some users may be more inclined to click links. So in the Web 2.0 world with Twitter and everything's a tiny URL, maybe that's something to think about is, are we becoming desensitized to what used to be the danger? Don't click on that link, hover over the URL, make sure you know where it goes. Some of the Web 2.0 technologies are actually kind of desensitizing users to that. So because web apps and browsers are complex, they have all kinds of things. following links is certainly a way to do that. And then they typically bypass security because we generally allow people to browse out over 8443 to do what they need to do for their jobs. So if you don't have things like outbound filters or URL filters or blacklists or DNS black holing, you can run into issues. Do you have a proxy in place that's going to detect if something's not actual HTTP or HTTPS going out over those ports? Follow my link, and as we're doing our escalating scopes, so we have password syncs. Anybody have password syncs at work? I had a job, this is one of my first emails was, hey, go ahead and put all your credential stuff in there so in case you lose your password. So totally not unheard of to have this asked of your users. And so it takes you to your password sync login, put your username and password in, and then we can log the results. Did everybody see that? Oh, sorry, I kind of clicked through that fast. Same thing, fish for usernames and passwords, common. Everybody sees this probably every day in their inbox. Like we talked about a little bit before, it doesn't always have to be about getting a shell. A lot of people, as they ease into allowing testers to do this, really just want to gather metrics on their users. So how many people got the email? How many people clicked the links? How many people forwarded that email? Did it get forwarded out of the enterprise to somewhere else? And an easy way to do that is just to create Google Analytics. You have two tags. You have one for the first page, the landing page. You have another one for the after they've entered in some sort of information page. So whether you're actually logging that information will become up to you and the client and the scope. But worst case is so they can put anything in. Once they hit that second page, we say, yes, they entered in data, and you can give them 2 sets of metrics. So I sent 100 emails, 50 people opened it, went to the first page, 23 people actually entered in some information, I didn't keep it. Those are pretty good metrics to give to your client. And then you can ease them into doing the fun stuff. Web examples, so exploits that actually go against the browsers. Some high-profile examples there, most recently, like here in 0902 stuff. So thanks for clicking the link. If you want to be fun, just put your big red button that says "Don't click me," and then count how many people actually click the button. It's kind of silly, but I think it's that whole thing of don't you tell people not to do it, and they're going to do it just to see what happens. I really want to know what happens if I click this button, and then you get something like that. Third-party stuff, so Yahoo Messengers, iTunes, pretty much every media player's had issues. And are you keeping up to date with that third-party stuff? Do you allow Real Player in? Do you have Real Player as part of your baseline? Are you patching that? There's tons of exploits for Real Player. So I give you a malicious Real Player exploit. You think it's good. You're allowing that out. It's normal traffic. And you do the same thing. All your AVs, almost all your AVs are installing like ActiveX Controls to go along with their stuff. And can you find, or is there any public exploits and vulnerabilities with that? So .movs, is that usually bad traffic? Yeah, when you get the runtime error, that's bad, but generally users don't think too much about MOVs being malicious. ActiveX Controls, do you want to run that? Most people say yes, especially if you put it in the fish. So here's an example from one of our other pen tests. Basically, we just did some stuff that was going on. We were trying to get an admin to click our stuff. So I said, hey, there's this new Java vulnerability out. I need all you admins, because they had really distributed all their adminning across to the different sections. I need you to check this out, look at the vulnerability, and determine if you need to have the systems you control patch that. Here, we set up a local page where you can download this stuff. Will be helpful for you. And so what was on the page was this access snapshot viewer exploit, which wasn't a memory corruption exploit. There wasn't a buffer overflow. All it would do is download a file to wherever you told it to. So what I had to do was download to the all-user startup. So next time someone logged in, it ran the malware, and we got our shell. So important. The important thing is the users had to enable the ActiveX control. You're kind of cheating because it's Office. People are going to, it's a Microsoft ActiveX control. But it was at this point, it had been out for a month or two. So they should have been patched up to that, and some of them weren't. So web attacks, anybody actually using any of these cross-site scripting shells for anything? I think we found them mildly useful. Not really. They're not probably mature enough to do a lot of things. But Beef is really coming along. Now Beef, I think, will actually serve up. You can get a user land. Cross-site scripting shell will actually deliver the MS-0902 exploit to it via cross-site scripting. So it's options. So you can maybe go, if you're doing a public organization, I can check xss.com and see if there's any public cross-site scripting for the site already. Then I can send them a link with the redirect. You can also just embed your Metasploit payload, any of your web payloads, into that cross-site scripting link and deliver it that way. So we're going to abuse some user trust of, oh, it's my corporate portal, I think it's okay. So again, if you're internal, you can do that. Val Smith talked about this quite a bit at his, one of his talks was, can I do script injection? So if I can get write access to the back end, can I just inject an iframe into every page on the website? And that's kind of like a news example of that where that happened. Again, you start to run into maybe exploiting people that you don't want to, but it's something to be aware of as a possibility. And anybody see any of this stuff regularly? Hey, you need to download this codec, or hey, here's a new executable for Skype. Whatever, I just need to convince the user to install. The big thing is, hey, here's the latest patch. I need you to go ahead and help me out and install that for me. Or how about Antivirus 2009? Anybody running into that? All right. I mean, so it works. If this stuff didn't work, the bad guys wouldn't be doing it. No exploit required, Java downloaders. If you keep up with Jeremiah Grossman's top web attacks of 2008, this was like number 8. Basically, there was 2 examples. This was an old Microsoft ActiveX control that would actually download files, and the other one he used was a Juniper SSL VPN ActiveX control that you could tell it to download files as well. So you couple that with the ability to, I can actually serve up the vulnerable control to you. You can start to actually leverage some pretty powerful things. Again, that's just downloading the binary and executing it. Iframes, everybody seen that? So aside from that being in China, would anybody worry about a blank page or maybe a regular page that just had, whatever on it? But in the background, we're actually getting hit with quite a number of things. There's our favorite real player stuff. And so browser Autopone. Anybody use this at all with the Metasploit? So if you're in the position that you actually want to try to do any of this iframe mass attack stuff, you can actually use browser Autopone to do that for you. You just go into the config file, and so instead of serving up 20 different exploits, I can maybe pick the top 1 or 2 that I want, that I think your organization may be vulnerable to, and it does some checking, user agent checking. So if I have a Firefox exploit, it will do it to Firefox. If I have an IE6 exploit, it will do an IE6 exploit. So that's something to look into if you're trying to replicate that threat and how your clients are actually going to react to that. And Metasploit will do that for you. Whew, I'm done.
Everybody still awake? All right. By the way, all those videos are available if you want to go learn how to do this stuff yourself, or you're having a hard time sleeping at night.
Put you right out.
Yeah, what time is it? We got a little bit of time. So all's not lost. There are ways to mitigate these. If you're a network administrator or system administrator that we may come and do a pen test for, please put your earmuffs on. Don't listen to this. All of these collectively can make a big difference. Individually, people are still going to find ways around them. So it's important to really go through all of these mitigation strategies along with everything else you're probably already doing and use them all collectively. Strong baselines, don't let your users enable macros. And if you have security settings that already don't allow them to run automatically, don't allow your users to lower those settings. Don't allow them to install third-party applications that you're not able to patch. Spam filters, like Chris said, every time that we've had an email hit an inbox, we've been successful on that pen test for that exact reason. So if that email never gets to the inbox, we might have a much harder time, especially if you have good firewalls in place. Outbound content filtering. So a lot of what you can do with Metasploit is just sending these raw connections over weird ports, or even if you are using the ActiveX stuff, it looks normal, but if it's going over some random port, then hey, it shouldn't be so normal. Standard netcat, cryptcat, all that stuff, and that's not normal going over 80. It's not normal traffic. So you should be able to filter out non-standard, non-compliant traffic that doesn't match protocols. And that's kind of your content filtering, your egress filtering. Host-based. So even if you have all these great network controls in place, what can the client do itself? Can people install their own applications? Can a bad guy run his own malware? So host-based IPSs that don't allow code execution. Strong group policy, we talked about that already, with Office things. Host integrity monitoring. Should I be able to add any piece of software I want onto a box after it's been booted? Is it part of the standard image? No, well, why is it there? And then training. So we all do this like yearly, annual training. Hey, flip through this PowerPoint, and at the end of it say, yeah, I took my training. I'm aware of what the bad guys are doing. Well, generally that's a bunch of crap. So something like this that really describes all those products that they see on a day-to-day basis that really help them understand, hey, this is bad. Or doing this client-side test. Hey, there's people coming, they're gonna send you stuff, and it might be bad. That's good training for all of your people in your organization. So stepping up the game with your user training could really help out your network. And then we have some inspiration. You wanna talk about?
That's my inspiration slide. I didn't come up with all that on my own. Lenny Zeltzer's done a lot of good work with doing client-side stuff. Same thing for Core Impact.
Yep. And I believe that's it. So there's the link to all the videos. Again, if you want to learn how to do it or fall asleep quickly. We have a little bit of time left if anybody wants to ask some questions. Yes, sir.
Have you found any particular demographics of clients that perform well over others?
All of them? Yes. Again, we spend a lot of time up front doing OSINT, so really figuring out what your organization does, what makes your organization's money. We spend, I would say, close to 85% of our time doing that before we ever send a packet downrange. The idea behind that is we don't really care who you are, we want to make sure that you're going to open what we're sending you. Yes.
Can you recommend any plugins for like Squid to kind of control? We have a lot of users that need to like upload a video to YouTube, so nobody still knows those protocols. But you want to stop malicious, because we find ourselves making Squid ACLs and avoiding a lot of stuff. Only to open back up.
I don't.
Yeah, I am not a network administrator. I like breaking them versus fixing them. So having a proxy in place is a good step. Having something that authenticates is a good step. There's not a whole lot of open source tools that can get through authenticating proxies. So you're going to stop a lot of script kiddies that way. But specific rules and ACLs for your Squid, google.com, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have an
I
answer
don't
for
know
you.
either, sorry.
Anyone else? All right.
All right, well, thanks.
Thanks for coming.